Hi, this is Professor Julian for Illustration and Graphics. This is a screencast. I will be doing a series of these screencasts throughout the course to give you some additional support and tutorials on Illustrator. A few rules going forward. I'll be using a Macintosh computer. I know some of you may have Macintosh or PCs. I'll also be using Adobe Creative Cloud. I know some of you have earlier versions, CS5, CS6. The book actually uses CS5, but most of these tutorials will work on pretty much any of the earlier versions. So fear not if there may be a few small changes here or there, but when I go through the tutorials, you should be able to follow along pretty much. The book in this class uses CS5. So I really urge you to read the chapters and practice. But I'll be giving you some tutorials here to try to ease some of that burden on you a little bit, but you definitely have to practice. So first thing we'll do is we'll launch Adobe Illustrator. I've already have mine launched. When you first launch Illustrator, you may see a welcome message on your screen. You can click past that. They will sometimes give you tutorials and tips, which are kind of cool. In this instance, I will launch the Illustrator program. Now on this screencast, it's hard to see my my menu bar on the top, so bear with me there. I'll try to walk you through whenever I hit something on the top menu, so you'll be able to follow along. So the first thing when you come to the screen, you want to create sort of a new document. Move some of my elements in. You want to create a new document. You can do this by either hitting Command N, which is new, or you can go to File, New. So let's take a look at this this menu. When you first come up in Illustrator, you give it a lot of different choices. First thing here is to focus on the name of the file. So we'll just name this tutorial. We'll call this tutorial number 1. You can create what's called artboards. In here, we'll just leave it as a 1 artboard. So that's pretty much where you're going to be working. Your profile can be print, web, or devices, video, or film. In this instance, we'll be using print. Later down in the course, I'll show you we'll be doing some things on web as well. So leave it as print. The size of your file, you can leave it as letter, but it could be legal, tabloid, or you can actually create a file any size that you want. So if you're creating a postcard, you can change the width and height. This is important over here because this is the dimensions of the file you'll be creating. So if you're creating a file, we'll be using inches most of all when we're doing print, or picas, which is a print measurement. Certainly if you're using anything on the web, you'll be using pixels. So for now, we'll just choose inches. We won't put a bleed. A bleed is where you, if you were designing a printed piece that had to be cut, you would create a bleed around a little 0.125 around the edges, and then you would, when the printer cuts it, you have you won't have like white spaces on the edges. So we'll leave that 0 for now. A color mode. So we have 2 color modes: CMYK, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or RGB, red, green, and blue. So if we're doing something with print, we'll be using CMYK. If you're doing anything that has to do with the web, you want to use RGB. So we'll leave it on CMYK. Our resolution is at 300, which is the highest resolution. Medium, 150, and anything on the web could be 72. So if you're doing something that needs to be printed with a printer, it'll always be 300. If you're doing something in black and white, that's just probably going to be printed on a regular home machine, you can use 150. And screen, which means anything that you're using on a screen, a tablet, a mobile phone, a web banners, you want to use 72. Okay, so then hit OK. So based on the letter size that we printed, you're going to have your baseboard that's right here. On the side of the left side, you have your toolbar. and on the right side you have what's called panels. So these panels by default will come up as sort of the basic panels. You can change these, you can delete these, you can remove these, you can add. Under the window menu, or at the top to the second to the right, second from the right, you have a lot of other elements. So all the ones that are checked off are somewhat in here already, and you can add other menus. If you click on appearance, for instance, it'll appear here with the color guide. So you can use this pull down menu here to show more options in that panel. You can drag these panels inside of other panels like that. You can make them shorter, longer. You can hide them by hitting the arrow key. Okay, so you can move them down. So on here we have a number of panels. We also have a number of panels that are hidden in this little menu. You don't probably need all of these panels, but we'll just leave them up for now. So you can hit this menu for other options, and you can hide, and it'll go back in here. So if you hit this color guide and you hit the arrow, it'll hide into that arrow. Okay, so you also have a number of elements that are up here. So whenever you add something to the pasteboard, this menu up here will change based on whatever's on the pasteboard. So for instance, on your toolbox, let's say I want to draw a square or a rectangle. As I draw a rectangle, so some of the options changed as we draw this rectangle. So you may have a stroke, you may have what kind of line you want to draw. Now Illustrator is a program that's vector based, so it means that it's made up of points and lines, and you can scale elements really to any size. So if you're going to do a billboard, if you're going to do a logo for a pen, and you have to scale it really small or really big, you want to use Illustrator. Now that goes, you still have to consider whether you have a bitmap image in there. So if you import a photo, you couldn't scale it to like 50 times the size. But if it was a vector-based image, if it was like a logo that was built in Illustrator, and you had a square or any points, you can scale that image 1,000 times and it will never lose any resolution. So that's a beautiful thing about Illustrator. Whereas Photoshop, you would, I'll do a screencast on the differences of the three in Design, Photoshop, Illustrator. But this is the program that's, if you're going to scale anything, if you're going to use anything really, really small or really, really big, Illustrator is probably the program you want to use. So remember that term, vector-based elements that are in Illustrator. So let's take a look at some of the first, whenever you save a file in Illustrator, you have this little asterisk here, means this file hasn't been saved. Even though I named the file, it hasn't been saved to a destination. So to save it, you will go to File and Save As. Now this is the first time you're saving it, so you have to say Save As. So I've created a folder on my desktop called UMUC, and I'm just gonna click that, and notice the file types. You'll notice in Illustrator you have different file types when you go to save a file. So the native extension for Illustrator is .ai. In Photoshop is .psd, and InDesign is .indd. So if you choose a different format, an EPS file, EPS stands for Encapsulated Postscript. That really means an outline. So it creates an outline of whatever drawing that you've created. It will create an outline of that. It will look it will look exactly the same as a .ai file. You can also export the ones you'll be using a PDF file, and SVG. If you're going to use other extensions, for the most part, you could also export this file into different formats too, and I'll show you how to do that. But for now, we can save this file as we'll be saving it pretty much either in AI, EPS, or PDF. So for now, I'll just leave it as AI. So you have to make sure and create, make sure this pull down menu is saying AI, and you hit save, and then it'll ask you what version do you want to save it as. So I'm in Illustrator's Creative Cloud. I could save it down to different formats. So if I was giving you a file and I knew you had CS5, I would save this down to CS5 or CS6, whatever version you had. You do lose some of the functionality or whatever you might have added in from Creative Cloud. You may lose that going down, but it means that somebody with a lower version of Illustrator can open the file. So if I save this as Illustrator Creative Cloud and you gave me, and you only had CS6, you wouldn't be able to open this file in CS6 unless I saved it down. Now I could always open your files. So if you gave me something in CS5 and I have CC, I could always open your files. So note that you're saving it down. I'll just save it as CC. So once you've saved it, the little asterisk will go away. And you'll notice up here it says what version, what color mode that you're in. So I'm in cyan, magenta, yellow, and black color mode. This is the color mode of print. So if you take something to a printer that's going to get commercially printed, you can use CMYK, or you can use black, or we'll talk about Pantone colors. When we're doing a logo, I'll show you how to change your colors into Pantone or use Pantone colors. Pantone colors are what's called spot colors. So that means that they're just one color, a specific red or blue or green, whereas CMYK, the colors are built up using cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Okay, so this first tutorial was just I'm just really giving you sort of the basics of the interface. You say you have your toolbox, and we have our swatches, and saving the file is really critical. Make sure you always save the file as as you go along. Once you've started working on something, so once you've started, let's say you take this toolbar, and here's a little rectangle, you can go over to your swatches, and you color it red. Notice that the asterisk comes back because it means you haven't saved the latest version. So in that instance, you can go Command S or File, Save. You don't want to save as anymore. You just want to, once you're working on the file, you want to save, and the asterisk will go away. So always keep saving. Illustrator does have unlimited undos, which means that you can, I can hit Command Z or go to Edit, Undo. So if I did a number of different things, let's say I paste a copy V and change the color of this, and then a copy Command CV and change the color to this, and I want to go back, I can just go Apple Z, hit Apple Z all the way to the beginning, or I could have gone Edit, Undo right here. So you can go back pretty much a limited amount of times. Now if I save this file, I may not be able to always go back as far as I can. Once I close the file, I can't go back to that's the latest version. So I always have a, if I'm doing multiple layouts and anything, sometimes I want to save something, I'll save as a different name. So let's say I created this and I'm creating a logo, and I really like the way that looks, but I want to try something different. I'll save this file, right? Command S, and then I will probably save it, the second file, as a different name. So instead of in tutorial 1, I may go tutorial 2 and save that. So it will save both tutorial 1 and 2. So I always like to keep multiple versions of whatever I'm working on, because sometimes, if you have a client and you're working on a project and you did something and they'd say, oh, could you change that? And you change the original file. And the client comes back and says, well, could you go back to the original? I really like the first one. You've already deleted everything and you can't get it back. So I get into a really good workflow, a really good habit, and it's a good workflow practice of saving multiple versions of everything, regardless of whether the client likes it or not, regardless of whether you think it was successful. You just save everything, and later on you can delete or you could remove things that you want. But you never want to work on something for hours and hours and then you didn't save it, and then you show the client a PDF and you have to go back and then redo the original. So get into a habit of saving multiple things, and you'll save yourself a lot of problems. Illustrator, they do crash sometimes, and you will not always save. InDesign is really good at saving whatever crashed. Illustrator doesn't always do a good job of saving that. So in the next tutorial, I'll be showing you a little bit more using the toolbars and some of the panels in Illustrator.